All right, hello everyone. It's been a long time since I did a video on an individual stock. I think my last two videos were on Micron and Next Decade. I think I was about a year early on Micron, so I'm not sure if that counts as correct. Um, Next Decade is another story, still a pre-revenue company, but I think it's still an exciting small cap which should be shipping a lot of LNG over the coming years. I'm keeping an eye on that, but I'm not invested in it for now. But today, I really want to talk about Bloom Energy. It's my favorite company, my favorite stock. The stock is crazy. We'll get into that later on in this video. But if you follow me on X, you know I've loved this company for a long time. I'm a trader, so I initially took a trading approach to this, and I don't think that was the right approach for this company because and that's the reason I'm doing this video. I think it has a really great long-term story which I want to go over. There are, very few stocks that I believe are long-term investments, but this is definitely one of them. Um, so this company, I think, has years of explosive growth ahead of it. I'd like to talk about why I believe that Bloom is a juggernaut in the power generation AI space. The history of this company and its CEO, KR Sridhar, is very interesting, and I want to cover that. And given the AI revolution that we're seeing and it's in the voracious appetite for power, I think this is the right moment for Bloom. The company's strength matches this moment in a very uncanny way, and I'll go over what I mean by that. The company has amazing technology and a growing backlog, along with a budding services flywheel, which is really kind of reminiscent of Apple's model of services and how, they sell expensive iPhones, and then all the while early on their services revenue was slowly growing. I see very similar things to that model with Bloom. Um, Also, we'll go over Bloom has a really cool, innovative roadmap, which I think is very impressive, especially from an engineering standpoint. There are multiple products here other than fuel cells, so we'll go over a few of those. All right, next slide. This is just a slide, capturing the environment that we're in. We all know that hyperscalers are going crazy. Um, this is why it's the correct moment for Bloom. We're in an AI arms race. The majority of hyperscalers have decided to spend ungodly amounts of money on data centers and AI because every single one of them believes that they cannot lose this race. And I think the key word here is race. There's no time for states, counties, or towns to catch up on AI. Grids are overloaded in most locales where data centers are being built. This is happening in my own backyard, Loudoun County, Virginia, where 70% of the world's internet traffic flows through in a single day. Uh, Citizens at first in our county were kind of happy to have the revenue kind of flowing in, but um, ever since our county has been inundated with data centers, there was an acceleration point, and I think a lot of citizens and even the Loudoun County Council is just trying to put the brakes on everything. And I think that's kind of a microcosm for what's going on in a lot of counties across our country. And hyperscalers can't afford to wait for this. They can't afford for citizens to get on board. They can't afford to anger citizens. So what are they doing? They're going to a bring your own power model, and that's where Bloom comes in. That's actually the mantra that the CEO of Bloom has adopted, bring your own power. Why worry about the grid if you don't have to? If you have a natural gas hookup or even hydrogen, you can skip the grid altogether with Bloom's solid oxide fuel cells. All right, so here's just a quick look at the solid oxide fuel cell. Um, the fuel, nat gas or hydrogen or renewable natural gas, otherwise known as biogas. If you don't know, biogas can come from landfills. So the variety of fuel sources is really cool and impressive here. But I think the majority of hookups across the country and AI build outs using this technology are going to use natural gas. And then just air. Air and goes into the solid oxide fuel cell stack. There's an electrochemical reaction, no combustion, which is key, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And the outputs are electricity, AC or DC, and then heat, and then water and CO2. If you use only hydrogen as a fuel, the only output is water and no CO2. I'm 99% sure of that. And then, but when you use nat gas, there is a CO2 byproduct which can be captured. Um, okay, really quick. This is a picture of a build out here. Just this is a very small one, a very small installation of fuel cells here. These cells are modular, so they can be daisy chained together, and to meet whatever the power needs are. Also, if space is limited, these modules can be stacked upon one another. All right, I wanted to jump into this slide, which is just really a review of the history of Bloom in kind of two parts. Okay, so I'm going to click on a link here in a minute from 2010. I found it out on the internet. But the CEO, his name is K.R. Sridhar. I'm probably saying the last name wrong. He's a NASA rocket scientist. His task was on a Mars mission back in the 90s. And if you don't know, 95% of the Mars atmosphere is CO2. So his task was to basically turn using solar power and then CO2 from the atmosphere to turn that into oxygen to breathe, and then hydrogen for fuel for rockets. But that project was canceled. So that is when the CEO went off on himself and created Bloom. So I'm going to click on this link here. So let's open it up. Okay, so this article again is from 2010, and I just wanted to go over a little bit of it. When Bloom, in its early days, they created something called the Bloom Box, which was an early version of the fuel cell. There was a lot of excitement around this company in the beginning, and they had a lot of initial customers: eBay, Coca-Cola, FedEx. Larry Page was the first customer. He had his house outfitted with this Bloom box. And here is when the CEO presented on stage, there was a box under wraps here to kind of get the crowd guessing. And then the CEO comes out and it's a box of sand. And he shows how there's a certain type of sand that's plentiful on different parts of the world, and that is key to making their membranes on their fuel cells. You can see that there was, Arnold Schwarzenegger was involved. So again, this is 2010. There was a lot of hype around this company. And there's Larry Page. He's the first customer. Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State, was on the board. And here's a little diagram again of how fuel and air goes through an anode, an electrolyte in the middle. They don't really tell what that is, and then a cathode on the bottom. Chemical reaction takes place, and electrons come out. That's it. That's what I just wanted to show real quick. Um, but there was, and you can tell by looking at this is a monthly chart that goes all the way back to, I guess, 2018. It just goes sideways and down for a really long time. And that's because there was no product fit here. They initially marketed the Bloom box to residents and businesses, um, but there was no urgency to install the product because there was no reason to avoid the grid. The grid was always there. You could just plug in, get what you need. So this created a lot of doubt on Wall Street for quite a long time. Debt built up in the company. I think there's 2 point some billion dollars of debt. Um, but then AI came along. And you can see when Wall Street realized that this spike out of the base right over $40 a share happened in June or July of 2025, and I think it was when there was a big deal with Oracle, and that's really what caused Wall Street to kind of rethink what they thought about this company. Um, Okay, so that's a little bit about the history. I really like stories where a stock is doubted, and then all of a sudden the exact right moment comes for that stock, and I think AI is it, and we'll jump into that. Okay, so the ability to provide on-site power within 90 days has really become a competitive moat for Bloom. Speed to power is super important in the AI race, and Bloom's solution avoids interconnect queues and substation upgrade timelines, which I see a lot in my county. Bloom's solution has clean chemistry. There's no combustion, so air permitting is pretty quick. Um, and again, the byproduct of usable on-site heat is also a second product. And I think we'll talk about that a couple more times. But heat can be absorbed into absorption chillers, and then converted into cold water or cold air to cool the data center. So really, this is a second product. KR talked for multiple conference calls in a row now about how 20% of the power of any given data center is allotted for cooling needs. Now, if you can get this all from your one fuel cell source, just from the off take of heat that you then convert into cooling, then it's a win-win. So I think this adds to Bloom's moat. KR believes customers who implement Bloom's absorption chilling can save that 20%. And again, one of the things that the hyperscalers are always talking about, if you listen to them, is compute per megawatt. And the industry is pushing towards all efficiencies you can possibly find to increase compute per megawatt. And Bloom's solution right now beats anything out there. This is the competitors, or at least the competing solutions for behind the meter. So we have industrial gas turbines. Um, they're the most dominant solution now. However, there's combustion is happening and there's pollutants. There's also a temporary use loophole that has been um, it's been utilized a lot for some data centers, but there are actively environmental groups are challenging this along with citizen groups, because that temporary use uh, loophole is being used where it shouldn't because these turbines are being run in certain communities and putting out bad air quality. Also on these turbines, they're heavily regulated and there's long build times. Second, there's nuclear power. We all know about Oklo and a couple of the other companies working towards this. There, it's still in the prototype stage, still years away. In my opinion, we will see nuclear power. The IEA says by 2030 we'll start seeing nuclear small modular reactors. However, I don't think it's going to happen in population centers. I cannot imagine, given what I've seen in my own county, that the not in my backyard cries have been so loud for some of these data center power issues now that there's absolutely no way I could see a small modular reactor going into anywhere near a population center. Maybe that's a better solution for, out in the middle of nowhere. So that's nuclear power. Renewables and battery storage, great, but wind and solar is intermittent. You can kind of smooth that out with battery backup. However, there's a lot of land needed for solar panel farms and wind turbines. That solution can't always handle the spikes that AI power is needed when usage is high. So fuel cells are increasingly becoming favored for clean, continuous, high efficiency power. There's no combustion again, less air quality permitting issues here, fuel agnostic. I already went over that, nat gas, hydrogen, or biogas. Um, Again, the heat can be used for chilling. And something we're going to talk about in, I think, a separate slide I have is the native 800 volt DC power by default. So there's no conversion from AC. All right, let's go to the next slide here. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention. There's a growing list of companies using the absorption chilling technology. There's a German conglomerate. I was looking into this called, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation here, but Geothermie Gesellschaft Bruchsal is using their absorption chilling tech, and Oracle is using it, Lawrence and Memorial Hospitals, SK Eternix, Terra Ventures, and there's about a handful of others that I saw. But I think this is a big thing, another product kind of in the that dovetails really well with their fuel cells, obviously. Okay, so why is 800 volt DC power such a big deal? um, if you skate to where the puck is going, that's the phrase to use here. NVIDIA's future chips called Rubin will use 800 volt DC. Right now, GE Vernova is a competitor to Bloom because they can build large-scale industrial gas turbines. However, these things generate AC power, which is a no-no right now, because that AC power has to be transformed back to DC, and you lose 10 to 12% of the electricity due to heat. So again, hyperscalers are worried about compute per megawatt, and you're gonna just throw away 10 to 12% of your electricity. I can't see hyperscalers doing this. The conversion to AC drastically pulls down the metric of compute per megawatt. Okay, so higher voltage DC allows for thinner copper cables as well. So less copper, which we all know has been going up in price along with all the other metals. Also, 800 volt DC removes the need for massive transformers, which would sit inside and take up space in the data centers. I think Jensen Huang was quoted as saying your revenues are power limited. So based on that, you want to have the most efficient compute architecture you can. And I think Bloom is kind of the definition of this. Okay, next slide. This is just a real quick one on how much more efficient fuel cells are than gas turbines. Um, 60% efficiency for a fuel cell and 40% for engines and gas turbines. So much more efficiency there. Okay, really quick, we've touched on this already, but here's a slide on the absorption chilling loop, saving 20% of cooling needs. This speaks to Jensen's quote. Hyperscalers can utilize every output possible, including heat, to increase their compute per watt. All right, so let's jump into the financials for this last quarter. Revenue came in at 777.7 million when the estimate was 655 million. So I have this chart on the right that I made. This is the latest quarter. You can see revenues really ramping here, especially in the last 4 quarters. Um, the the revenue guide for 2026 was 3.1 billion to 3.3 billion, which is a greater than 50% growth. I will go over why I think that is likely low. Um, okay, here's what the backlog is looking like. Um, no, sorry, this is guidance. Won't go over that. Um, here's the backlog. So the current in 2024 the backlog was 2.5 billion. Now that has 2.5x to the current. It's now a $6 billion backlog. The service backlog is also growing very fast. Um, One thing I wanted to really point out is that on this last call, KR emphasized that every single order is tied to a service plan. And this is, again, points back to the Apple model, right? These fuel cells, I'm probably going to get the dates wrong, but they really need to be replaced and serviced. I think it's about 5 to 7 years. And it's a very easy replace. It's very similar to like servers that go bad. You just pull out the bad one, put in a new one. Um, or if you've ever been around a drive that's gone bad, you just hot swap. It's the same technology. You can hot swap in a new oxide panel. So it's really cool technology there. But the implication here is that the installed base compounds into service revenue, and this service piece is just going to build over time. Um, also, you're going to have a consistent relationship with your customer that you're going to always be talking to your customer. Your customer is going to likely come back to you when they need more, when they have more power needs. Um, so just wanted to go over the backlog and some of those concepts there. Okay, this is interesting. Let's talk about um, the let's talk about how their engineering, just kind of my outsider perspective on their engineering. I think it's really interesting. He created this company 25 years ago, and I think it's been through many, many iterations. But from my limited outsider perspective, he's doing pretty solid engineering work here. On the call, he spoke about having digital twins of every single solid oxide fuel model that he has out in the field. These units are constantly feeding data back into the digital twin model. So this is pretty solid, modern model-based engineering at work, and I think it allows the data to be analyzed. you can look at the data and identify bottlenecks or limitations, and then you can feed it back into your model and improve the next version of the fuel cell. And I think that speaks to this chart here. So non-GAAP operating expenses as a percentage of sales, you can see that's been going down since 2021. I mean, I don't know how much to read into this. Sales are going up a lot, so maybe this should be going down anyway. But based on what he was explaining on the call, um, having a digital twin and being able to feed data back into it to try to always be iterating on your product is very cool. That's the way things should be done. Um, so this, uh, also I think about GE Verona being a competitor and jumping into the fuel cell space, which they are. But imagine trying to catch up. I mean, Bloom has basically 15 years of models in the field, real data feeding into these models. I think Bloom has a huge lead over anyone trying to get into this space. They're going to have the more efficient model for a long or for a long time to come here. A couple more highlights from this past conference call. I already talked about the digital twin. Um, rapid. Another feature he mentioned that they were working on that I thought was cool was rapid load ramping without battery backup. So they have a new feature. Again, we talked about how AI can sometimes, when use gets really high, you get these power needs spikes. Well, they have a solution that they're developing, and so far he mentioned that engineers have been able to handle any ramp that's been thrown at them, any power ramp. So that's really cool. That's a third product now. Um, we talked about native 800 volt readiness. I think I have a separate slide on that. So I'll talk about that in a second. But one thing that was really cool to hear was how confident KR was about not being the bottleneck um, for AI projects. He said we will not be the bottleneck for any AI projects, and I think that was really highlighted in recently in the Oracle deal that they had. They have this policy, or Bloom does, where they commit to be able to do an install within 90 days, and they installed in 55 days. So that was really cool to see. Um, so just real quick, why this call sounded different. Definitely the scaling capacity I didn't touch on. He said that the scaling capacity at Bloom was just an incremental cost. It wasn't, they didn't have to sink a ton of money into to scale. It was just kind of an incremental cost, and they're scaling towards 2 gigawatts. Um, okay, another thing I wanted to touch on was the customer base is very diversified. This was mentioned numerous times here, but this is a slide showing how he's got some broad commercial and industrial customers other than, AI data centers. Verizon, AT&T, Walmart, Google, eBay, FedEx, um, Comcast, Cox Enterprise. And then on the left-hand side, we see all the data center clouds. Intel is a customer, as well as American Electric Power, AWS, Equinox. They do a ton of these AI data center deals, and then of course Oracle. All right. Next slide. Okay, there's a few more things I wanted to mention, and this one could be another important differentiator. There is a 30% tax credit for fuel cells built after 2025. And the businesses, investing in fuel cells get paid a 30%. So if you're a big hyperscaler, why aren't you going to go for this credit? I mean, this is huge. So why would you install a gas turbine when you're not going to get 30% back from the US government? This is huge, in my opinion. Okay, and here's something that I'll just throw out there. That I don't think has been covered anywhere. There's been no PR about this, but there is a massive project underway in Cleburne, Texas. It's a 500 megawatt behind the meter solid oxide fuel cell project. I think it's underwritten by a company called Yellow Box. It's a beast of a project which just got air permitting approved in Cleburne. I confirmed this with a post that I saw on LinkedIn from the company Yellow Box that I believe is funding this project. So, how big is this? This would be Bloom's probably second largest after the American Electric Power. Um, but I think it would be the largest single site deal that Bloom has ever done. It dwarfs these other ones, this 80 megawatt and this 100 megawatt AEP initial offer. So what does this mean from like a revenue standpoint? This is why I think that the 2026 revenue guide is low, because this single project could be 42% to 56% of the 2026 revenue guide if it's all done in 2026. This is a multi-year project. I don't know, but it's very large. Um, and right now, air permitting has been cleared. Um, But again, I think this is a near-term catalyst. When this deal is officially announced, I think it moves the stock substantially. Right now, you can only, you can find it in like some of the Cleburne, Texas county websites. It's in the process of moving through the approval process. But again, I think it moves the stock because this is going to be such a substantial percentage of the revenue guide. Okay, just a couple more here to speak to some of the deals that have already happened. So this partnership between Oracle and Bloom is ongoing. It's characterized as a multi-stage, many data center rollout rather than a one-time project. The first phase of the collaboration was really successful, with Bloom delivering the first fuel cells um, to Oracle in just 55 days ahead of their initial 90-day commitment. This was the deal in July 2025 that sent the stock soaring, and I think it was like a wake-up call to Wall Street that Bloom has a very viable solution to AI power demand. The second is this $5 billion Brookfield asset management deal. This was another prove it type moment for Bloom. Brookfield is a well-respected firm that backs billions of infrastructure projects around the world. They obviously did work to understand Bloom's solution, and they decided they wanted to be the major financing partner to Bloom. So what does Bloom get out of this? They get faster close rates on deals. Um, they get, or potential customers get to see a big pocketed investor kind of standing behind Bloom. Bloom gets a return from the infrastructure projects. Actually, Brookfield gets a return from the infrastructure projects, and it goes into Brookfield's AI infrastructure fund. And also, Brookfield gets preferential treatment to Bloom's tech for AI factories. And last, we have the AEI, the American Electric Power deal, which was a huge deal. When it initially came out, it was just a 100 megawatt deal. But then AEP quickly agreed to expand it by 900 megawatts more for a total of 1 gigawatts. The purpose is to provide immediate on-site power for large data centers and industrial users, bypassing the 3 to 5 years of wait times required for traditional grid infrastructure expansion. So right there, that tells you why AEP did this deal. They could expand 3 to 5 years of waiting around for permitting and other things. And that is, in one sentence, how Bloom can sell its products. The target areas here were Ohio and Texas, with a major project planned in Wyoming as well. Um, the the offtake agreement was for 20 years, where they're taking energy from these Bloom fuel cells. This partnership is considered very significant because this is the first time there's been a big collaboration between a fuel cell manufacturer and a major utility to date. Um, this highlights the increasing role of distributed on-site generation in the era of rapid AI expansion. All right, so that's it for my slides. Really quick though, I wanted to end this with a look at the stock. The stock is another question. This is the daily chart. Let me just go. Here is the monthly. Right now, we're early in the month of February, of course, but this isn't the best looking candle. So it's a really volatile stock to trade. But this breakout point at 150, I think if it can get over that, it can try to hit 180 or 178 and make new highs again. But it is a crazy stock. I've reserved some cash to try to buy some lower. I have a pretty big position now. But if it gets down to 125, I think that's a 50% retrace of this move from 75 to 175. So I would buy again at 125. It may or may not get there. We'll see. There's some support here at 120, and we have the rising 50-day as well at 119 right now. But I have noticed anytime this thing dips, it really gets bought up fast. It's been a fun stock to trade, but again, I want to own this for the long term. Okay, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think about Bloom.